this planning committee meeting on the 4th of December. My name is Councillor Gary Marsh. I'm the chairman of the planning committee. To my left is my vice chairman, Councillor Hitchcock. To my right, we are graced with the director of planning, and to her right is Steve, is the development control manager, and we've got various officers to his right. Members are surrounded. Oh, and sorry, Brian, I forgot about the legal officer. And in the corners and up on the top there is the committee members. I'm just going to reiterate what you just heard a few minutes ago. Can you make sure all your mobile phones are off, please? We don't really want that to happen. And I shall go straight into the meat of the meeting. So item 1 is to note substitutes. Well, we're all here. We all know that we've lost Councillor. Oh, I don't know where Councillor Sane is. Do you know if he's coming, Abdul? Give him a poke. Is he coming? No. You haven't heard? Okay. I haven't had any substitutes. And I've not received any apologies for absence in item 2. Item 3 is to receive any declarations of interest on this agenda? No. Item 4 is to agree by general affirmation. I do want to make a slight amendment to the minutes, because the minutes of our last meeting, the one we cancelled, put my vice chairman as absent. Oh, he is here. Thank you. That's okay. Was that Councillor Hitchcock was absent. He actually gave apologies of absence, and that's why you took over. So can we have that amended, and then I'll sign it accordingly with that amendment in, please. Does that agree with the? Yeah, agreed. Thank you. Item 5 is to consider any items that I agreed to take as urgent business. I have none. So we go to the meeting of what we're here for. Item 6 is DM 252495, Unit 2627, the Orchards, Haywards Heath. And members, you're probably, when you read the report, aware that this is the only reason it is here. It's because we own the site. So, Stefan, this one's yours. Hiding down there.
Thank you, Chairman. The application relates to Units 26 and 27, the Orchards in Haywards Heath, and would replace an existing shopfront. The application, as the Chairman has outlined, is before committee today, as the site is on Mid Sussex District Council owned land. The site is positioned to the western side of the shopping parade at the Orchards, and the locality is characterised by a number of retail units displaying different services and vendors. And as you can see on the location plan, the two units are side by side one another. At present, Unit 26 is occupied by a Goldsmiths, and the proposal would alter the shopfront to match the signage and vendor in Unit 27, which is currently an opticians. The conversion of Unit 26 internally wouldn't require planning permission in its own right, as it would remain within the same use class E as a commercial use. The existing doorway at Unit 26 would be infilled with brickwork and a white UPVC window. And as you can see on the elevations, the signage and branding above the doorway would be altered to match the opticians next door, and the brickwork at low level would be changed to match that of next door as well. And the materials generally would be used to assimilate with the locality. So these are some photos looking from the shopping parade towards the west, and as shown in the photos, the lettering and signage associated with the Goldsmiths can currently be seen, and next door we've got the alternative lettering and branding with the opticians, and the two are separated by a brick pillar at present. The works proposed are considered to be small scale and result in an acceptable impact on the character and appearance of the area. Officers therefore consider the proposal to be in accordance with the development plan, and it is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
waiting for the computers to boot up. You ready? Yeah, okay. Right, item 7, we're going to hear item 7 and 8 together, because it's the same building. One is for the building and one is for the listed part of it. So this is DM 25/1103 and DM 25/1104 Marlow House, 107 High Street, Linfield. This one's yours, Susan.
Right, just before I start, I would just draw members' attention to the update sheet, just to let members know this application has been on the update sheet is the agent's comments on the committee report, and also it sets out what he does see as the public benefits, and it has got an officer response to that. So the application seek retrospective planning and listed building consent for a variation to approved 2022 applications and incorporate some reinstatement works where historic fabric has been removed. The 2022 applications gave consent for the demolition of a modern two-storey rear extension and demolition of a modern conservatory, the construction of a new two-storey extension to the rear elevation, alterations to a bakehouse, various works to the listed building to include roof and chimney repairs, window and door replacements, the demolition of a partly constructed 3-bay garage and the construction of a new detached garage, along with associated hard and soft landscaping works, and new timber gates to the driveway entrance with new permeable driveway surfacing and planting. The works that have been undertaken have for the most part been implemented in accordance with the original plans that were submitted in 2022 prior to the submission of significantly amended plans, which followed extensive negotiations. In addition, there have been other internal works to the building that include the loss of historic fabric and finishes to the cellar and the removal of historic floorboards from the attic, and retrospective consent is also sought for the removal of a ceiling, an attic floor structure above a bedroom, and creation of vaulted ceiling. Turning to the slide, this just shows the location of the property at 107 High Street, and it's a Grade 2 listed building in use as a single dwelling and sits directly onto the pavement frontage. It has a large rear garden with access off Hickman's Lane. Either side of the building, there are other listed buildings. A Grade 2 listed building lies to the north and dates from the 17th century, and Limes Cottage to the south is also Grade 2 listed and dates from the 16th century. The site is located within the Linfield Conservation Area and within the built-up area boundary. So now turn to the proposed application. So retrospective consent is sought for a rear first floor extension. And this slide just shows the plans that were submitted for the 2022 application. And this is the approved plans following negotiations. You'll see that as built, the extension at first floor exceeds the approved dimensions and extends across almost the full width of the building and engulfs the 19th century rear wing. The extension as built reflects the original submission prior to any amendments. A chimney stack has also been removed. The 18th century bakehouse to the rear of the building was to be retained with some alterations, but it has been rebuilt to a different design, including the extent of the fenestration and the height of the chimney stack. So this just shows the slide elevation of the bakehouse, and again, the 2022 application as submitted, as amended, and as built, and you'll see that the extent of the glazing is almost the same as that on the original submitted plans. Continue with the external changes. The application also seeks to regularise landscape and works within the rear garden of the property and through the access from Hickman's Lane, which are also not in accordance with the approved scheme. In particular, the landscaping includes a new substantial timber pergola, a metal archway, and at the rear of the house, a patio has been surfaced with black slates. The rear access gates have also been constructed to a different design to the approval. The approved gates were a traditional style timber gate and have been replaced with a more contemporary design with open metal work at the base of the gates. You will, however, note from the committee report that the landscaping and the gates are not considered to be contentious. I move now to the internal changes to the property. A 17th century staircase and stair enclosure, which previously connected the ground, first and attic floors of the house, have been removed in their entirety. And there are reinstatement works proposed to reinstate the stairs, and they are shown as having a central supporting steel post with the timber treads notched into them. This is at first floor, and that's the ground floor details, but with the staircase enclosure admitted. And this would not be an accurate representation of the original stairs. So turning to the floor plans, again, this shows what was submitted, the 2022 submission, what was approved, and the current proposals. And you will see that the 17th century staircase was shown as removed. This was then put back into the approved application. And now there is the reconstruction of a staircase, although it's not accurate in terms of what was removed. There's also been a WC put in at ground floor, which was in the original, again, was removed following negotiations and has been put in as built. So this just shows closer up of the ground floor lounge, and there has been a partial partition wall removed, and the proposal now is for the reinstatement of a door jamb, and this just shows a photograph of that. During the course of the rear extension constructions, there was a ground floor well that was found, and this has now been covered with glass, and the walls of the well have been lined. Turning to the first floor, and I'll just go through some of the changes. The staircase, again, just to show that was shown as removed as submitted, again was shown as approved, as being retained. And then there is the staircase, which is proposed to go back to partially replace that. Also in this, there is a reinstatement of a door, which is shown on the drawings here, so that a bedroom door would actually be replaced. And that is just further details of the bedroom. So that's the door that would be replaced, but just to note there would be a sink in front of that door so that it wouldn't actually be usable. And as set out in the report, there has been also the removal of a ceiling and the master bedroom and an attic floor structure. So that has created a vaulted roof within this room, which you can see in the photograph there. And then at attic level, the historic floorboards have been removed, and it now appears to have been entirely covered with chipboard and plastic insulated sheeting. Some of the timber has been used elsewhere, for example, to create doors. And in this, as the proposals, this is green area here, which is dotted, is shown as being an area which they would replace some of the original floorboards. Turning finally to the cellar, there has been some loss of historic fabric and finishes here, and we don't know whether beneath the render that's been applied to the walls, whether there was any historic fabric, and there now appears to be a new cement screed floor to the floor. And the changes also that are proposed are to change this existing trapdoor and put it into a two-part door. However, just to note, this doesn't reinstate the historic form of the access, which was by a doorway to the side of the stair enclosure and gave an opening onto the cellar steps. Right, now I'm just put a few photographs because there has been some discussions about the state of the building before the current owner occupied it, and this does show that the building, while it was a bit tarred, was actually not in a state of disrepair. That just shows some more of the internal rooms. And then this is the external property before it was taken over by the current owner, and that's the work that have been done to the property. This shows the staircase which has been removed and the enclosure. This photograph is what property looked like prior to any works taking place. So there had been some ad hoc development at the rear. This is the bakehouse, and then these are the photographs of the property as built. This just shows the well, once again, this is the works to the cellar and the trapdoor to the cellar. And then finally, those are the gates that have been installed and the metal archway and the garage that's been built. So, just to conclude, the full details are set out in the officer's report, and it's the conclusion of the Conservation Officer and Historic England that there has been a significant adverse impact on the historic plan form and fabric, which reduces the manner in which the special interest of the house as a multi-phase building, dating originally from the 15th century, with significant phases of alteration during the 17th, 18th and 19th centuries, can be appreciated. And I would note that in terms of Historic England, it is unusual for them to comment on an application, particularly in the context of a Grade 2 listed building. In the majority of cases, their resources don't allow them to get involved, and they would leave the decision-making to the local authority. But in this case, they have chosen to get involved and, in fact, to make a site visit with 2 officers attending. And they have prepared a lengthy written comments reflecting their concerns regarding the works that have taken place. And I think it's worth just going over their summary, which says, overall, the unauthorised works have removed or obscured understanding of important historic features that help illustrate the evolution and multi-phase character of the building from its original 15th century origins up until the 19th century. In our view, the proposed rectification works do not adequately reduce the harm caused by the unauthorised works. And I think it's important in this case not to confuse the high degree of finish, which no one would argue has not been achieved, with the preservation of historic fabric and the plan form of interest. So the Conservation Officer has identified that the harm that has been caused is less than substantial. And where the harm would be less than substantial, in terms of the NPPF, the criteria is set out in paragraph 215 of that document, and that would apply. And this is the balancing exercise that must be undertaken by the decision maker, ensuring that considerable importance and weight is given to the less than substantial harm to the heritage asset that has been identified. And it should be noted that in the National Planning Practice Guidance, the public benefits should not be a private benefit. And as no public benefits have been identified that would outweigh the harm identified in heritage terms, the proposal would fail the assessment within the NPPF and would not comply with policy DP 34 of the Mid-Sussex District Plan. Therefore, the recommendation before you, as set out in the Office report, is for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Susan. We do have 2 speakers speaking against the, in support of their application, but we've got against, but it's in support of their application. Yeah. I'm going to call Simon Dougal or Peter Rainey, who's going first. Simon Dougal. All right, if you come to next to my colleague there, yeah, and press the right-hand button, a red light will come on, and as soon as you start speaking, a clock will appear on that screen in front of me, and after 90 seconds, I will say you've got 30 seconds left. So when you're ready, please, Mr. Dougal. No, it's not ready yet. It's not gone on. The right-hand button as you look. Yeah, it's ready. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman and committee members. I'm here because I made mistakes. I'm here to rectify my mistakes. My wife and I have lived in the parish for over 30 years. For years, we waited for the opportunity to purchase a house in the heart of Linfield, and would be our final home. I would like to reassure you this was not for financial gain. In 2022, Marlow House became available. It had drifted into a truly dilapidated condition. 30 letters of support, of which many describe just how bad it was, some questioning why it was never put on the risk register between 1987 and 2023, despite various requests. This house has been an eyesore on Linfields High Street. Previous owners carried out extensive unauthorised works. We hired specialist local architects in listed buildings, consulted with all our immediate neighbours and received their full support. We also had positive heritage reports. We felt confident, but our application was rejected. We amended the scheme and eventually received planning permission, although the Conservation Officer still objected. During construction, we altered certain elements that required listed building consent, many of which we were unaware of, and I sincerely apologise for this. But we sought specialist advice throughout, structural engineers, experienced craftsmen, 2 heritage specialists, yet their expert views have been totally dismissed. On November the 6th, we offered to reinstate numerous elements to address the Conservation Officer's requirements and concerns. This email was totally ignored in the Conservation Officer's report 4 days later. Why? When it clearly demonstrated our willingness to help solve these problems. We offered to reinstate 16 out of those 20 points raised by the Conservation Officer, some of which, in spite having legal permission to have undertaken. None of those are included in the latest assessment by Mrs. Dudley. And yet we have never had one objection from the public. Over 30 letters of support, 2 heritage consultants complement the scheme, Linfield Parish and Linfield Conservation Society.
Just sum up in one sentence, please.
We rescued a property that was falling into decline. We saved a building that was seriously affecting the beauty of the High Street, which is a material public benefit. We believe it is in the public's interest to approve our scheme.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I forgot to give you 30 seconds. I do apologise. I was reading your report and thinking, that don't sound like what you're saying. I won't tell you how to do it, Peter. You know how to do it.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon. My name is Peter Rainier, Director of Planning at DMH Stallard. As you might expect, I'm going to be professional, honest, but candid in what I have to say this afternoon. I accept that this is a difficult case, where there was negotiation which led to an approved scheme, but works were then undertaken beyond what was approved. Consequently, this application is a retrospective one. That is on the one hand unfortunate, but on the other hand advantageous in that what we can all see now is the quality of work which has been carried out and the impact it has. In considering this application, there's a requirement to carefully consider the works which have been undertaken and assess how positive or how harmful they are, rather than simply saying they deviate from the approved scheme and are therefore unacceptable. That has, in my opinion, been the approach of officers here. The development that has been undertaken has delivered an exemplary restoration and refurbishment of the 15th century timber-framed house, which comprises the core significance of the listed building. The new interventions are sensitively designed, combining traditional and contemporary elements, sympathetic to the building's high architectural value and historic interest. The considerable list of reinstatement works now offered
30 seconds.
will further enhance the property's heritage value. Taken as a whole, the effects of the proposed scheme would be positive in heritage terms, excepting a degree of harm resulting from the full width rear addition. Nonetheless, the heritage benefits of the proposal are manifold, in conjunction with overarching benefit of securing the heritage assets' beneficial use as a single dwelling on a long-term basis, as part of a fully restored property that was previously in very poor condition indeed. The implemented scheme includes the restoration
Sum up
of
in
the
one sentence, please.
building's external envelope and the adjoining gable of number 109, which has been repointed in lime mortar. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, I'm a bit remiss. You probably don't know who the Emily Wade is, because some of you probably don't know who she is. She's our Conservation Officer, and I welcome her to our committee today. Steve, I understand you wish to say something.
Thank you, Chairman. Just in terms of just to address some of the points that have been raised, I think it's important to note, and it hasn't been set out anywhere, that unauthorised works to a listed building that affect the character and significance is an extremely serious matter. That is a criminal offence. You can't pick and choose what elements of a planning permission or listed building consent that you implement. And you know, it need to be clear that the application before you and the works before you are currently unauthorised in their entirety. That's a matter of fact. Given the potential serious consequences of undertaking unauthorised works to a listed building, it's surprising that these retrospective applications can be seen as advantageous. In this case, on the basis of the quality of the workmanship that can be seen. It's clear the quality, it's clear that the quality of the workmanship is of a high standard, but that is not the issue that the officers have with the proposal. The issue here is the loss of the historic fabric and significance of a listed building. And for context, you know, only 2% of buildings in the UK are listed. And it's also, and set out in the report, it's also important to note that we do have a statutory duty to have special regard to preserving the building or its setting of any features of special architectural character, historic features it possesses. Comments have been made regarding the officer's approach to these works, not just in relation to this application, but the project in general. It's the role of your conservation officer to provide the professional expert opinion on the degree of harm, or not as the case may be, to the historic fabric of a listed building in respect of works proposed. The report in front of you sets out in detail those professional views and makes clear where harm has been caused. It's then for the planning officer, and obviously now committee, to consider that information, those views that you have, and apply that to the policies that are set out in front of you. As the case officer pointed, it's important to note that Historic England, who are the government's statutory advisor on the historic environment, have commented on these applications and identified similar concerns to your officers. The previous consented scheme is a material consideration in respect to the current proposal. As shown in the presentation, the presented scheme was subject to considerable negotiations as originally submitted. It was unacceptable due to the harm to the historic fabric of the building. It was also clear from the submissions, for reasons that we don't need to know, in terms of why it was chosen not to implement the approved scheme. And it's important to note the approved scheme was acceptable in listed building terms, but implement a scheme that resembled the original, which was unacceptable, in addition to doing other works. While the current applications have been considered on their merits, officers' views on terms of the harm and acceptability of the unauthorised works has remained consistent, and the current applications do not contain any mitigating factors that would alter these views. I think it's important to say much reference has been made about the reinstatement of certain features, which in the speaker's view would further enhance the property's heritage value. Once historic fabric has been removed or lost from a building, harm is caused, and no level of reinstatement can reproduce the historic value of that original feature, fabric or structure, let alone provide enhancement to historic value. At best, reinstatement reduces the level of harm caused, but can never be an acceptable substitute. I think so. The applicant's heritage submissions and the position reflected by the speakers that the effect of the proposed scheme would be positive in heritage terms, while accepting a degree of harm from there is a degree of harm from the full width rear extension. The view of officers and that of Historic England is that it's not just the full width rear extension that causes harm, but a number of other elements, and this harm cannot be addressed by reinstatement works. And in making a decision, its view as a committee need to consider the evidence that's in front of you. And certainly, I would say as an officer, but in terms of the officer provided by the evidence by your officers and the Historic England is clear and consistent. Now, Chairman, if it would be of benefit then we have the conservation officer here who is happy to just outline to members the actual significance of the building in this instance in terms of, to give you the context of the assessment that she's undertaken, if that would be useful.
It probably would be useful. But before we do that, can I tell you the reason how it got called in the first place? Because the previous leader of the council, Councillor Jonathan Ash-Edwards, contacted me and said, "You're the most senior planning person we've got. Can you get involved in this? Because I have real concern." This is what happened a few years ago. I have real concerns that we as a council are not allowing listed buildings to come back into life. We're there falling apart. Now, we saw the pictures. It was conveniently, I've seen other pictures where it was full of rubbish. It's being obviously cleared for those pictures to be taken. Anyway, that's not the point. The point of the matter is, I was asked, because we have a lot, we're blessed in this part of the world of having a lot of listed buildings. And as a consequence, they're not museums. And I think that's where I was called in to have a look at it. As it happens, negotiations between the applicant and the Susan and the conservation officer went along those lines. Clearly, it hasn't followed, hence the fact we're sitting here with a retrospective application. And I sat down with the current leader of the council and we discussed it on our weekly to monthly, well, our meetings we have regularly about this. And this came into the conversation. This particular application came in. And we both agreed that we had this as the public interest, which, if you remember, we've done this on the, well, we don't know it yet, it's coming in next month, the Mask in Rocky Lane. And that was done under the public interest part of the call-in. And we had that one, we just had a recent one down in Burgess Hill. And that's how it came in, because he was concerned, like myself, that we were allowing listed buildings to not evolve into the 21st century. And that is why it was called in, for no other reason than that. Emily, can you please just explain, because I think you need to explain to the members currently why, and I'll just go to it. It's 2.7, and it's harm has been less than substantial to the heritage assets. And I need you to understand, you need to explain to the members less than substantial to the heritage, because we were always told it's serious. So please, can you, over to you, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, before I go on to the nature of the special interest, just to answer that question. The term less than substantial comes from the National Planning Policy Framework.
We understand.
Yeah, so as you'll know then, there's two grades of harm set out that we have to work. We have to establish if any harm is present at all, where the harm falls. Does it fall within the substantial category, which is essentially a complete or almost complete loss of significance from an asset. Typically that would be demolition or gutting of a building, something like that. Anything below that level is less than substantial harm. So obviously that less than substantial spectrum is very wide. It could be anything from a very low level of less than substantial harm up to something which is high and approaching, you know, that significant, sorry, that total loss of significance. Where we are with the current proposal, because of the loss of historic fabric that's occurred, particularly the 17th century winder staircase, part of the 17th century attic floor structure, the loss of the floorboards from the attic space, other aspects of the impact on the plan form and fabric, which have taken place over and above the approved schemes, is that we're sitting within the less than substantial range, but towards the upper end, because these features are so important to the fabric of the building, to its plan form and narrative. So is it okay if I now move on to sort of speak a little bit about that, how the building evolved? Yeah. So as we know, Marlow House is a Grade 2 listed timber frame building, which you'll see from the photographs. It's developed over around 600 years in several distinct phases, and it's our ability to read these different phases in the fabric and the layout of the building, and what this tells us about the changes in construction techniques and the way of life of the people living there, which is the key to understanding the building's special architectural and historic interest. The house was originally built in the 15th century, to the best of our knowledge, as an open hall house. This is a typical medieval form of construction, which included, to the best of our understanding at the moment, a full-height open hall towards the centre of the building, which would have had an open hearth on the floor, no chimney stack, and then the smoke from that rose up right into the rafters of the building and escaped through the rafters. And then at Marlow House, as we understand it, this open hall was flanked by two-storey elements, both of which were also at that point open to the roof. So the subsequent development of the building is complex and not entirely fully understood. However, in the context of the current applications, it's the phase of substantial modernisation, if you like to call it that, which occurred in the 17th century, which is particularly relevant. At this time, the house was extensively altered to reflect changing tastes towards greater privacy and comfort in the home, and possibly it's been suggested to accommodate a different use, such as a shop at the ground floor. So these works which took place at Marlow House are very typical of the building practice of this period in general, and evidence for them at Marlow House contributes to our understanding of how people chose to live at this time and how buildings were commonly updated to reflect this. In terms of the fabric at Marlow House, which has been affected by the current proposals which we're concerned about, dating from the 17th century or thereabouts, we have the insertion of a large central masonry chimney stack replacing the previous open hearth. We have the insertion of a first floor structure within the previously open hall at the centre of the building, and of an attic floor above the new and original first floor rooms. So a ceiling was introduced above the first floor, creating a new storey within the attic. To provide access between these floors, new or enlarged floors, an enclosed timber winder stair was constructed against the rear wall of the building. We also have later phases of alteration, which are of a degree of interest as reflected in the Historic England comments. These include the refronting of the building during the 18th or 19th century, the construction of a bakehouse to the rear of the property. That was originally a detached building, but became attached through later extensions, reflecting the partly commercial use at that time, and the construction of a two-storey rear wing of additional domestic accommodation in the early 19th century. That was to the right of the house, as you were looking at the photographs that Sue showed you from the rear, has a gable on it and a sort of attractive Gothic window. So in terms of the works that we have before us, you will have seen from Sue's report and the presentation that she's just given that there's been a loss or adverse impact on many aspects of the building's historic fabric and plan form, which has arisen, unfortunately, from the works which have taken place over and above the consented schemes, which would in themselves have allowed for a comprehensive refurbishment and modernisation of the building, including replacement of the rear extensions, but without harm to any of these areas that we're now concerned with. In particular, we've seen the loss of the 17th century winder staircase in its entirety, including its enclosure, the partial loss of the 17th century attic floor structure above the southeast bedroom to create the vaulted ceiling that Sue showed you, the loss of the overlying historic floorboards, which have been, as far as I'm aware, either removed from the house or some of them have been cut up to make doors, other features within the house. There's also been an adverse impact on other aspects of the early plan form and fabric, from alterations to the layout of the building and from removal of or alteration of partitions, covering up of 17th century floorboards at first floor, other more minor works. So the cumulative impact of all of that work on our understanding of that 17th century, that very important 17th century phase of work, is quite severe, particularly the removal of the staircase, I would say. There's also been some adverse impact on the later phases of the construction or alteration of the building, in particular the demolition and replacement of the 19th century bakehouse, 18th century bakehouse, and the engulfing of the early 19th century rear wing by the enlargement of the rear extensions across the entire width of the building at first floor. Unfortunately, it's not our view that the mitigatory measures which are included in the current application are sufficient to in any way address the harms that have been caused. A cumulative impact on the special interest of the building, and in particular the way that we're able to read its narrative, and in particular that very important 17th century phase of modernisation, has been significantly harmful to its special architectural and historic interest. And that's a view which is shared by Historic England.
Mrs. Chairman, Emily,
yes, sorry.
It might be helpful if you saw some pictures to actually, so as we can see what is being said here. Mr Chairman, what do you
That's
think?
fine, yeah.
Have,
You know, it's
Yes.
hard to visualise.
yes, sorry, yes, I'm sure it is.
That would
Yeah.
be helpful.
Yeah, so that's the early 19th century rear wing, which is now internalised by the rear extension at first floor. The bakehouse, top right-hand corner, obviously you can see the historic brickwork there. That's been unfortunately demolished and replaced entirely with new fabric. I think just while we've got that bottom left-hand photograph up, I might point out that really everything you can see there, with the exception of that very top left-hand corner of the roof, is modern fabric. So we've lost from that rear view really any appreciation of the age of the building or the fact that it is a historic building at all. Sorry, yeah. But internally,
That's the entire back of the house, of the building.
if you stood further back, you would see, I think, more of the top of the ridge of the original front range.
Gotcha.
But basically what you're looking at is completely modern fabric at ground and first floor.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Would you agree, before we go into the debate, and I've got a few people who wish to speak, that a lot of damage was caused by the previous occupiers to this building, and we haven't taken into that consideration at all? And I understand from looking at on the portal, the chimney had to be rebuilt because it collapsed, and as did part of the boiler, the house that the bit on the bakehouse at the side. So, from my layperson's point of view, more guilty of the fact that the applicant didn't actually contact us when these things happened, which is probably what's caused a lot of the miscommunication, would you not say?
I mean, I think obviously we do accept that things do go wrong sometimes during the course of construction work. However, particularly when you're dealing with a listed building, really the correct course of action is to stop, talk to us. If you see a structural problem, come and talk to us and we'll try and help you to find the resolution
But
to it.
it's all on the rubble on the floor.
Well, I mean, we have a version of events as to what occurred with the bakehouse, but I think if you look at the approved and the plans as built, you'll note that the applicant has removed significantly more fabric from the bakehouse than he
It is
was
obvious. You can see.
approved to do so. So obviously, if you remove more fabric from the structure, then the risk of it being structurally weakened is presumably greater. So it's very hard to sort of comment on the causes of that structural collapse.
Susan, could you go back to the well, please? You just flashed past it, because this has bemused me, this has. And I am going to, obviously, I'm not wanting to dominate, because I think this is to the heart of what this is all about, to be fair. That well there. Nobody, not even the applicant or us or any record, said that was there. Correct? Would you say?
Well, we weren't aware that it was there. But having said that, that is within the consented form of the ground floor rear extension,
When he started doing the work, that was uncovered, correct?
as far as I'm aware, yes.
Okay.
However, it would have been uncovered if he'd built the consented schemes,
It would have been.
yeah, without any of the harm that's been
I
caused
need
elsewhere.
to, I think in my own mind, I need to know what harm that has caused.
I don't think we're saying that it has caused harm.
Well, you did, because it says in the
No,
report.
I think what we're saying is that because the work was done without us seeing the exposed underlying original fabric to the sides of the well, it's difficult for us to know what's happened to that original fabric. It might be that what's been done is perfectly fine, but we didn't see it during the course of works. Again, we were presented with a fait accompli, and we don't know what was behind that lining.
I know what's at the bottom of that well. There's a river.
Obviously not somebody, that's really.
I know there's a river there. Because I stood on the glass on that and I looked down, because I did request every one of the members of this committee to attend this building, because, with the consent with the leader and I, because most of what's happened was inside the building, and looking at the front of the building, you would have seen what everybody else would have seen walking up and down the street. Hence the fact, we did ask that, and, you know, those of us who know Warnlid and the Half Moon Pub, they've got one of those with the lights on, and it's a feature. So I'm not saying you're wrong, I'm just saying it was constructed, and yes, they made mistakes. The applicant has put his hands up and said he's made some mistakes. So I've spoken, so I think Councillor Sweatman, you were the first person to, it's come off the thing, but I do remember that you were one of the first ones.
I'm back on now.
Yes, you're back on.
Yes, thank you, Jim. Yeah, I mean, I've visited the site with yourself, and I thought, well, you know, to my mind, I think they've done a wonderful job. But I can appreciate Emily's point of view, and Historic England have got serious concerns about the internal heritage assets. And I think the applicant has perhaps done things that he shouldn't have done. But I think Steve has answered the question I was going to answer. They've agreed to do 16 out of the 20 points that you've raised. So I just wonder how the council stood on that, but I think you partially answered that. I do think it's, in this modern age, I don't think we can be strict, but not too strict on, otherwise what you're going to do is to, I think, as a comment, you're going to start put people off taking on these listed buildings and looking after them and making them habitable for the 21st century. So I think this is quite a difficult application to decide on. And I'm all for heritage, but, you know, some of the things in now, I've just wondered whether we've been a bit too pernickety. Not everything, but just, you know, a couple of things, minor ones, but I'll leave it there and see what other members have to say.
I think Councillor Kennedy was on that list. You disappeared, so come back on again, please.
Not for the first time. Can I just ask a question? If we go along with the officer's recommendation and refuse this application, what happens?
It's been the gift of the applicant to appeal and go to...
Indeed.
He can.
But if he didn't appeal, what action would the council take?
We would engage in enforcement action.
Yeah, and
then we will...
what has been built, a lot of it would be enforced,
yes.
Knocked down, perhaps.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think
it's important to be clear about what the potential is.
Yeah.
And the result of any decision that we make today, before we start getting into the debate and discussion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I think I'm going to let Steve answer that one because I've got my views on it.
Thanks, Chairman. Well, no, you're right. Obviously, if the application's refused, there's a right of appeal. Obviously, with a refusal, we would look to serve an enforcement notice, and that notice would set out what works would be required in order to remedy the harm. Obviously, you have the 2022 approval that, you know, we considered that acceptable and there was no harm. I can't say what would be in that enforcement notice, but you can see where you potentially need to move to in terms of the works required within that enforcement notice. That enforcement notice also has a right of appeal.
Okay.
So you know, the applicant, you know, the outcome of today, if you do go along with the officer recommendation, isn't the end of the road for the applicant in terms of the process.
Yeah. Thank you. I just thought it was important to be clear about.
I think it is. I think also, if we're going to go down the enforcement, would we not want these points put back together, put back in? Steve?
Well, that would be the purpose of the enforcement notice, because you would set out what works are required in order to remedy the breach, and that would either require a certain removal of certain elements or or as best you can, putting back a replica of features. But that's still acknowledging that harm has been caused.
I don't think any member of this committee at all thinks there's no harm being done.
Yeah.
And the idea of the retrospective, as I was always led to believe, was a new application. And are we not putting the cart behind the horse or in front of the horse by saying, well, we're putting enforcement, but we want all these things he's prepared to do? I'm a bit confused. And I've been around for 23 years doing this.
So obviously, we're dealing with a listed building, so it is a different beast to a normal semi-detached house that isn't listed. You get a retrospective application, you're just looking at it on its merits. You are looking at this on its merits. However, you have the statutory duties to look at in terms of preserving. You know, where harm is identified, so any harm, so it's only set out where you know, less than substantial harm is a wide range. But as soon as you identify harm, the NPPF requires you to if you wanted to approve an application, balance that harm or weigh that harm against the public benefits.
Absolutely.
This is a private residential property. You know, there are no public benefits which are associated with a private residential property. And one may say in terms of in terms of the renovation work that's been done to the front of the building, except that's an improvement.
Yeah.
But I would say is that was secured as part of the original 2022 permission. So that benefit was there. So what you're actually looking at is additional harm has been caused over and what we considered acceptable back in 2022. Where are the public benefits that will outweigh that additional harm? So you obviously that there aren't any. And I think we do need to be quite clear. It is set out in your report that in terms of private benefits are not public benefits.
Yep.
And we're quite consistent in terms of determining applications for resident, you know, in terms of extensions on listed buildings. If they are harmful, then our position consistently is there are no public benefits, and that is again what's reflected in appeal decisions as well. So that's what you need to have in mind in terms of where you do consider there is harm. You then have to say, well, where are the public benefits? And the reinstatement works are not public benefits. All they're doing is reducing the harm that's already been caused. They're not enhancing the building in any way, shape or form. They're just reducing the harm slightly.
I am more confused now than I was a few seconds ago, because we were going to put enforcement in for the reinstatement works. I think this is where the confusion is.
So,
Can I just ask a question, because I think it may clear something up.
Yeah.
If we refuse this application and we have an enforcement list put against it, once that enforcement list is completed to the satisfaction of this council, is the harm significantly reduced enough to say that the harm that's still there is acceptable?
yes, you know, once you've complied with an enforcement notice, then you have met the requirements from planning. Obviously, the other elephant in the room, which is what I highlighted earlier, is in terms of unauthorised works are a criminal, you know, potentially, you know, and there is the potential for prosecution. Now, that's totally separate. That's not for this committee to worry about. It's a completely separate process. But clearly, in terms of running, in terms of enforcement action, then that still leaves it open for prosecution, which is totally separate. But, you know, you can't, yes, you know, essentially by meeting the requirements of an enforcement notice, then that would draw the matter to a line up from a planning perspective. But that obviously, that does not address any prosecution issues.
Okay, thank you. I think that's, thank you, Vice Chairman, for that. Councillor de Bell.
Thank you. I think, actually,
No,
councillor Kenny was before.
oh, sorry, Councillor Cunning. Yeah, you are above
Sorry,
that, so I do apologise.
Trying to stick to the rules, boss.
Okay, so my comments are very much in favour of the officer's recommendation. I think we should refuse. Why are we here? We're here because a consented, not because it's a difficult building or there's a great seriousness, but because a consented application, which the applicant negotiated with the council and agreed to, was not implemented. Something else was implemented. I personally think it's very significant that the original submission is effectively what was built. In other words, the phase of negotiation where the applicant said they were going to build a compliant plan, then they absolutely did not and went back to their original things. I think we're here because the applicant was absolutely determined to have a design along their lines, even if that was at detriment to the key features. The list of 20 items is not, the real issue is that back extension, it's the staircase, and it's what happened to the bakehouse. Those are the key things, and they will be very, very tough. They may be impossible to fully rectify, but we should take it very, very seriously. It's a criminal offence to, operate on listed buildings in this manner. I don't think previous occupiers, Chairman, is relevant at all, because the consent and the agreement was made around the state of the building at the time, and that happened in 22. The well is neither here nor there. It's not an important matter in terms of what the officers are after. So I think it's incumbent on us, if you look at the government's website covering these matters, it talks about how serious it is, and it says it's important to uphold the integrity of the process. If we don't take care of heritage, then we should. No doubting, and I spent a lot of time at a full tour of the building, no doubt the standing of the work that was done, but that work was done in the face of what was asked for. There could have been a wonderful home, completely compliant, on the basis of the consented scheme. There was no need for this at all. That's my comments.
Okay, now, I'm going to take one issue with what you just said then. The breeze blocks were put in and they were considered a heritage asset, the breeze blocks. The breeze blocks were put in and they were considered as a heritage asset. Now, I personally don't think, because that was part of why they were taken down.
Yeah, I think obviously we have to bear in mind that we have a 600-year-old building here, and it's a timber frame structure. Timber framing can be extremely, has great longevity, obviously, but the infill to the framing is often not, for various reasons. It's not as long-lived as the wattle and daub or the lath and plaster that was originally there. It's not unusual. In fact, it's very common for timber frames, the original infill, to have been lost for whatever reason and replaced with more modern fabric, which might be brickwork. Obviously, blockwork would not be our first choice. But having said that, in no aspect are we penalising the current applicant for work that's been done prior to his occupation of the building. And the presence of blockwork in certain partition walls does not justify the loss of or adverse impact on plan form, or the loss of other historic fabric, which might include timber framing, but also the floorboards, etc. It's unfortunate that it was there, but it's in some ways, in the case of the current application, it's neither here nor there.
Okay, just that I've misunderstood
no, fair
that
enough.
then,
That's
because
good.
I read it and I was thinking,
Yeah.
really? Councillor de Bell.
Thank you very much, sir. Can we, as part of what I'd like to talk about, can we have a look at the front of the building again, please? Post and now, please. So, basically, on the left is what it used to look like, and on the right is what it looks like today. Yes? Yeah. I mean, I would like to say that in East Grinstead, for instance, there was a historic building which was under regs there, and the same sort of result applied. The front stayed exactly the same. In fact, it was clearly tidied up. It's obviously been painted, etc., etc. And therefore, they were allowed to do whatever they liked at the back. And they drove a cart and horses through it in order to make it more useful at the back. Now, I don't think, from what I've seen, that we've seen that here. And clearly that looks to me like somebody's living there. It looks really nice, and it's maintained what it looked like in the first place. I'd like to speak up for the gentleman, what he's done here. And as I say, it's been done elsewhere. I know that there are things that have been possibly done inside, which you made the point, this is not a museum. And I think that that's a very important thing for us to take into consideration. This is a house, a home that has been altered inside. And I think that that's an important thing that we should take into consideration personally. This is my personal feeling. I'm not expecting everybody to fall into line with that. And I know that it's maybe something going forward that, as our leader has said, we need to be more careful that we give people advice how to restore buildings and make them part of what is the frontage of a lovely town. But I think that, in my personal opinion, apart from a well, I've known where other wells have been covered over the piece of glass so that you can see through it and things like that. And it could well be that some restructuring inside would make it fall back into line with things. But personally, I think it looks pretty good, and I'd like to speak up for the gentleman that's done it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor DeVille. Councillor Cherry.
Oh, thank you, Chairman.
You're light.
I'm all right, aren't I? Oh, dear.
Sorry.
I've written a load of
Terribly
stuff.
sorry.
I'm sorry, I've written a lot of stuff here, but anyway, I'm going to cut it back. Much has been said about the substantial harm that this development to the designated heritage asset here. And I point out that this designated heritage asset had been left in a complete state of disrepair for many years. And it wasn't, and I refute what the planning officer has said, that it just needed a bit of tidying up. It needed a whole lot more than that. And I went to view the property this week and could see firsthand the excellent refurbishments that have been achieved by the current owners. And they have quite simply brought this house back to life. They're creating a fine family home whilst retaining its historical heritage. One thing about the bakehouse, which has been ignored, is the actual interior of the bakehouse, which I sat in that bakehouse, and they have created a beautiful environment which still reflects its heritage. There are oak beams beautifully displayed on the walls, and a fine view of the garden. It is light, it is airy, absolutely lovely. Another thing that, I'm going way off my notes now, another thing that I dispute is the replacement of the oak flooring on the first floor. Now, clearly, with the age of the house, the original oak flooring was past its best. And I could tell, and anybody could tell, when you were standing on the refurbished oak flooring, that the original flooring was still there. You could feel it because it was not in any way level. And in fact, Mr. Duguid had shown me that the bed that was in the bedroom actually had to be propped up at one end because of the irregularity of the floor. And I noticed one of the stipulations by the planning officer was to actually dispute the fact that the original floor had been, was still there. And they were expecting the current residents to actually lift up their beautiful oak floor to reveal what is clearly there, the original floor. So I'm not buying any of that at all. And another, a lot of reference has been made to the replacement of this winding spiral staircase, which which originally went from the cellar up through the ground floor into the first floor and up to the loft. Now, the planning officer has admitted that actually this staircase will be of no practical use whatsoever because when it was originally constructed, people were a whole lot shorter than they are now.
Well, as you out.
Yeah, and if you've ever been on HMS Victory or anywhere else, you know what they're talking about. Everybody was about 4'6". So it has no practical reason for its replacement whatsoever. And I would actually suggest that it would present a serious health and safety issue here, because I know on speaking to the resident that they, not only does he have a 93-year-old grandfather who frequents the house, he also has 5 young grandchildren. And what do young children like doing? Climbing up steps. And can you imagine the health and safety issues of that? So it would be a completely detrimental effect to replace these stairs. With heritage buildings, you do have to, move on from what life was like, 300 or 400 years ago. When that house was originally built, there would have been no toilets, no flushing toilets. Flushing toilets were not invented to the later on in the 17th century, and in fact they didn't come into proper use until well on in the 18th century, when a gentleman named Thomas Crapper, I believe, actually invented the proper flushing toilet that we still enjoy today. So let's not get too tied up with medieval living. We're now in the 21st century, and I was very, very impressed with what the residents have done. And I think, I'm going to close in a minute, I think the planning department needs to encourage more of this type of development to bring fine historical buildings back to life, rather than this form of discouragement, which I'm afraid will deter other people from taking on such similar refurbishments. And the work and commitment of the current owners has put into this refurbishment should be applauded rather than punished. And if you clearly, the tremendous support of the residents of Linfield, plus the achievements of the awards from Sussex Heritage House, awarded them the Sussex Heritage House of the Year, it needs to be recognised and celebrated by us. And I rest my case with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
I don't
Thank
think
you for listening.
I don't think we're in a court case yet.
But
You better not go on HMS Victory then, as an ex-Navy officer. Councillor Casella.
Right, this is an interesting case to me because
Isn't it?
we've had disagreements with the conservation officer in the past, and I've always said buildings should be allowed to evolve. Now, obviously, this building, as agreed by everybody, has certainly evolved over the years. In the 17th century, people moved in, decided what they did or didn't like, and evolved the building. Same in the 19th century. And again, this is another phase in the building's evolvement, if you like. But an arbitrary line has been drawn and said you can't evolve it any more than this. But that's not why we're here. I don't doubt that all the work that's been done in this building is top class, splendid, etc., etc. The owner wanted to evolve the building. He put in plans, and after much negotiation, those plans were agreed. He then totally ignored those plans and did what he wanted to do in the first place. That's why we're here. We're not here to debate the quality of the work. We're here to debate the fact that he broke the rules and didn't do what he said he was going to do. And that's why we're here. I totally agree. I disagree that the building should evolve. Yes, it should. He's probably done a great job, but that's not what we're here for. We're here because the rules have been broken. And that's my view.
Actually, you are right and wrong. To be perfectly honest, we're here because the applicant has put in a retrospective plan application to rectify the work that he knows he did wrong. That's what this is what we're here for. We can't debate what he did wrong because that's been done. That will be down to the planning department and legal department at another time. What we're here to debate is the restoration and the application of 16 of these to be put right. That's what we're here for, not what he did wrong. That's it. Councillor Kennedy.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Casella. This is a very difficult, very interesting case. In fact, probably one of the most interesting cases
We've ever had.
I've ever had since I've been on the committee for the last 2.5 years. I'd like to thank Mr. and Mrs. Dougal, first of all, for allowing us to come in to look at the house and look at the works that have been done. Again, very, very interesting. But I think we can't forget that this is a listed building. This was purchased as a listed building, which carries a whole range of responsibilities. And planning permission was applied for, and as you've said, Councillor Casella, after negotiation, it was granted. And then Mr. and Mrs. Dougal went ahead and built something in contravention of those agreed and granted permissions. Now, there is no doubt in my mind at all, as we've all said several times, that the works have been carried out to what, as a layman, I think is extremely high standard. It is a beautiful home, but you can't ignore planning permission, go ahead and build what you want, which is, to a large extent, why we are here. And I agree, perhaps not quite so strongly, with what Councillor Kenny said. You can ignore, I suppose, you have to ignore what's gone on in the past. But as a listed building, somebody's not kept an eye on this during the past 20 years or more, perhaps, before Mr. and Mrs. Dougal bought the property, because it was in a right state, a real mess. And what they have done is tried to rectify that, enhance their home, and maintain, in my view, some of the historic aspects of the house. Perhaps they haven't done it quite within the within the requirements that have been set by them, which is unfortunate. But we are really in a dilemma situation here. The heart says, well, we should just accept this and grant the retrospective application. But then we perhaps create a precedent for others.
There's no precedent in planning. We've been told that so many times.
No, I know, but you know, it's done once, it might be done again, so it would encourage people who have listed building
Potentially, yes.
under their ownership to go ahead, private planning permission, get it and then build something slightly different or quite different. So we need to be careful about that and think about that as well. So I'm torn, but I think my heart says go ahead with it. My brain says no, we shouldn't. We should go ahead and accept what the officers say and refuse the application, despite the very good work that's been done. And some of the suggestions that have been made, like replacing the vaulted ceiling which has been created in one of the bedrooms, and taking up the flooring in one of the bedrooms, as Councillor Cherry said, seems a bit unnecessary, I would have thought. But again, I'm not a planning expert. The harm is not substantial either. It's less than substantial, which is interesting. But I'll leave it there, and I think you know where my vote will go.
Yeah. I've seen you come up, Councillor Kenny, but Councillor Hitchcock, other than a question, I'll let Councillor Hitchcock go.
Yeah. I tend to agree with Councillor Kenny. There has been obviously a serious breach here, which needs to be addressed. But having looked at the house for well over an hour, I think I was in there and I was allowed to wander where I wanted to. There are one or two issues in there which are in the list, which I consider have been done as essential works to retain the structures, new and old, in a serviceable condition. And those are the work that's been done on the basement, which has produced a basement which is now relatively dry and has climate control in it, and has been modified, only minor modifications in my view, to produce satisfactory drainage. It's an issue which I would have addressed in my previous job as being a compulsory requirement of the refurbishment. The other one is the well, which is at the back of the house, and it's close, but not too close, to piling that was undertaken for the new structure. Whenever you do piling close to a well structure, you inspect it after you finish the piling to make sure it is in a satisfactory condition. That was done. And a specialist well contractor came, looked at the well, made a recommendation, and the structure of the well's circumference was upgraded with a superb piece of brickwork, in my view. I would like those two elements to come out of the list. Okay? They are significant items, and they can come out of the list without having any effect on the structure of the old house and the new house. They're there because of a necessity. And I'm sure if they had been brought forward with the relevant calculations in the appropriate manner, they would have been approved. So my view is that I'm probably going to refuse this, but I want that list that's going to be attached to this refusal to be a list which is slightly softer than the list that's there now, so that these people can get on with it and try and get this monkey off their back. Thank you.
Councillor Kenny.
Yeah, just a very quick, I'm not going to go on for very long, just to following on from what Councillor Kennedy said. Yeah, we are faced with a dilemma. The reason that we're faced with the dilemma is that they went ahead and built it against, that's the reason we're stuck here with the problem, that they did something technically illegal and went ahead and built it when they had agreed something that was fully compliant and could have been a wonderful home built to the same good standards that we saw today.
Councillor Brown, you haven't spoken yet.
No, thank you. I've
been listening.
I've been listening, and I came having seen it and very confused of how to move. So, in terms of public benefit, I think there is a public benefit because nobody would know what's going on at the back of the house or what's going inside the house. But the public benefit is you've got a smart house on the high street like all the others. So it's as simple as that, rather than something that's that's broken down and not cared for, which could have been the case because it's a very substantial building. Excuse me, just yeah. In terms of the rear elevation, that's not visible from anywhere. There's nobody can see it, no neighbour. It's entirely private. And, you know, in our district, there are, it says in the district plan, there are over 1,000 listed buildings. And many of those have got very substantial and interesting extensions at the back of them. And, you know, many of them are hall houses like this one. This isn't it's not a surprise. It's well known how these houses were developed into multi-storey houses. And, you know, so the story is known. And then we come round to this staircase, which seems to be the main bone of contention. And I mean, it's obviously a vernacular staircase going from the basement to the loft. And it would have been, you know, there's no way that could ever be replaced, because it's been boxed in why? Because it was drafty and cold. And if you try and replace it with a modern spiral staircase on a steel frame as proposed, it's not going to be really of any use to anybody. And it's going to be, I mean, they've got underfloor heating is the main heating there. But underfloor heating, it doesn't circulate very well. It heats it heats in a horizontal manner, and the staircase it wouldn't serve any useful purpose. It's gone now, and whatever decision we make at this committee, or indeed if it goes to appeal and an inspector looks at it, they've got the same situation. You can't. It's gone. And putting it in, it's a circular route for children to run up and down, because I know I've got one in my house, a modern spiral staircase, and all my grandchildren, they all love to race around the house and go up the main stairs and down these stairs. But so what you end up with is a drafty and cold installation, and you know, replacing something that's gone, and that's what life's like. You know, sometimes you lose things and you can't. So I'm struck by this put right list, which is what in my game we used to call these. And you know, most of them, and even I would say, I'd even move that this put right list be proposed in some way. But I wouldn't be pushing for the spiral staircase to be replaced at all. And you know, the other things they are there. They're cherished. They're there. You know, in the case of this Gothic rear elevation stuff, you know, the owner assured me that it's there. And I've no doubt it is. And, you know, it's not really useful for the residents. And then really, just finally, in our DP 34, it says that basically the alteration, it should ensure that the building remains in viable use. And I mean, this has done this in spades. It's in viable use. You know, it'll be expensive to heat, and I won't go towards DP 39 because it's not part of our. But well, in terms of sustainability, I mean, I'd like to see the back of those horrible glass things over the new stairs at the back and in the bathroom. I mean, they're really terribly lossy in terms of U values. You know, So, but that's it. I think, and I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they're in this put right list anyway. So, thank you, Chairman.
I think they actually got permission. Did they get permission for those? For one. For one? Was it one or two? Was it the
staircase.
what do they call them? I've
Roof
got one in my,
lights,
I've got one in
passo
my
roof
house. I
lights.
can't remember what they're called.
Yes.
Yeah, roof
yes.
lights.
Off the top of my head, I'm sure there was one above the staircase. I'm not sure about the one above the bathroom.
You can't see it.
No.
You need a roof plan to see it.
You need a roof plan so you can look down on top of it. But I thought you'd given plan permission for that. For the
Well, there
roof
was,
lights?
I think possibly for the one over the staircase, but you have to remember, of course, that the extension extends further to the left as looked at there than it did under the approval. So I think the second one is probably, we'd have to confirm, but probably sitting over the unauthorised part of the extension rather than the bit that was approved. So I think it's sitting over the bathroom.
There's a roof light, as Mr. Dilbert will know, but from my memory on visiting on Monday, there's a roof light over the staircase. Yeah. There's also a roof light in the ensuite bathroom that overlooks, or you look out onto it and you see
Oh,
the
you see the
adjoining,
pointing of the wall, don't you? Next.
gable end that's been pointed.
By 109?
Yeah, at 109.
Yeah, far left-hand side of the flat roof, that's it, yes.
Yeah.
Just below that. So
Yeah.
it wouldn't have been in the approval, I don't think, because as you can see, the roof form is different and it didn't extend that far across. Yeah.
Oh, it's there. Councillor Cherry, you wish to? Because you came and you went.
Just a couple of points that I forgot to mention, my last tirade. The bedroom, the smaller bedroom upstairs in the older part of the building, where the original ceiling, albeit rather low, has been removed, and so we've got the attic roof. Yeah, the vaulted ceiling with all the beams put in makes a very pleasant bedroom, and I feel that by replacing this ceiling again, what possible advantage would that serve to this room, which the ceiling will be far too low for the existing height of most people, and I understand it's going to be used as a guest room. And it would create a very claustrophobic atmosphere in there. So I'm not sure about the viability of that, and I would prefer to see that not included on the list of possible refurbishments. And also, I feel that the winding staircase, that has to go, to be honest, because there's absolutely no advantage to that. And I've again introduced the safety issues on that. No advantage, and please don't subject the residents to unnecessary additional costs on that. And my final point is the issue concerning public benefits, that it's suggested that the only benefits for this refurbishment are purely private. And I would dispute that. And this has been demonstrated by the many, many letters that have been received from local residents all over Linfield to show their support of this, to turn a derelict building back into a beautiful building. And in fact, it would have a serious detrimental effect on the fabric of Linfield as a picturesque village if this wasn't adhered to, and thereby there is tremendous public benefit in having this done. Thank you.
Councillor de Bell.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. I think it's most important that at this stage we remind ourselves and everybody that the officers have done a first-class job.
Oh yeah.
There's no wrong there. They have brought forward things as they would with in any situation for concern where people tend to overstep the mark, shall we say. And so we have to listen to them, but I think it's so important we recognise that something has gone awry here, but it's where we go from here. And I think that I would plead for, rather than punishment, and I'm sure that that's not in an officer's mind, to be able to look at how we put this right to the best, but remind ourselves in the future, as colleagues have said, that there are other situations where people have not, and possibly might well not, intend to do things of a nature that's conducive to everybody. So I think that we need to tread carefully forward, is my suggestion. Thank you.
Wise words, that's why you're a Navy officer and I wasn't. But what I will say is, we're not here to rubber stamp.
No, absolutely.
And we get a recommendation, and the officer has to make, by law, has to make a recommendation, and it's down to us to maybe to take a contrary view, and we have done in the past, and no doubt we will do so in the future. We don't do it very often. I'm not saying we're going to do it in this case. I'm just saying that we are here as a public body to make a decision. Right, so I think we've had a really good debate on this one. Now, remember, there are two votes we've got to do. One for the, what this application is all about, and then a listed building application. So we have a recommendation from the officers, so we will go to the vote unless I hear anything contrary to that. Are we going with the recommendation with the officers? It seems that way. No?
I just wondered if there's a way we can work through this and
I'm
go
with
against
you.
the officers, but put conditions into an approval that will satisfy their believed shortcomings.
Yeah.
Is that a way forward? I don't know.
So what you're saying is basically you're not going with the officer's recommendation, but you want reassurance that
Yeah, I want the
all-
officers, some at least of the officers' concerns to be addressed in any approval that
So
would be granted.
if, say, for argument's sake, I'm just going to stick to one of them. I've got the wrong flipping bit. Say, for argument's sake, the well. We're not going to expect them to dismantle the well. So we can satisfy the.
And can we do that? I'm just talking about, this is a question about process, really.
Yes, Steve.
I think we discussed this earlier, didn't we, Steve?
Yeah, you've got an application and a scheme in front of you. You need to determine what's in front of you. I've heard about the wish list, the works list, etc. The majority of them aren't in this application. You have to determine what's in front of you. Now, the issue about understand the bit about the works list, and that might be an issue that is addressed at another point in time.
Later on.
In terms of a potential enforcement issue, if you go with the officer recommendation and there is a refusal, the applicant is able to maybe address some of those points as any part of any appeal process. But you need to consider what's in front of you, and I'm looking at the list of various points A through to P on my printout here, and a lot of them are not included within this application as it stands in front of you today.
I thought 16 of them were.
They're proposing to do some works, but those works are not included in this application. They're not shown on plans. They're elements that you can't condition and have a condition that would alter the approved plan. So you need to consider what's in front of you and take your view.
I was just trying to find a way through this and try and resolve it today if possible, rather than coming back and causing you extra work. If we can sort it out today, it might be better for everybody.
I understand that, but, as I said, we can't condition elements which aren't part of the application and would vary the details that we have in front of us at this minute in time. I appreciate that the applicants have indicated they're willing to do some additional works. And, I would say those additional works still won't overcome the officer's concerns about the harm. The harm would still be caused. Because I go back to the point about reinstatement can't address the harm that the loss of these elements have already undertaken.
There is a way that we could do this, believe it or not. And I don't like this way, but it's the way that I think I can hear from certainly elements of the committee that we defer this, so further work can be done between the applicant and our conservation officer and Susan, because she's the officer whose name's on the report, so that we can actually find a ground, because I can see the committee's pretty split down here. Now, I don't know which way the committee wants to go or not, because I haven't called for a vote. But I do feel that a lot of what has been proposed will satisfy, and a lot of what's been proposed won't satisfy. So I do feel that the way we could potentially go for this is have a deferment, it comes back, there won't need to be a huge debate like we've had this time, and can go from there. Now, I'm only proposing that, I'm not saying it's the...
I think that sounds right.
You think that's a good idea?
No.
Yeah, I'm reluctant to defer things, but I think in this particular case, there could be advantages.
Sorry, Chair, can we have an officer's comment on that?
Yes, sure, of course.
Well, our view to you always is you've got a scheme in front of you, you should determine that. Ultimately, that is the scheme. A deferment will, while the applicant may be able to put in some additional information to address some of these points in this list in terms of reinstatement, it certainly won't address the fundamental concerns that the officers have. So the report that you will have back to you will be the same recommendation. It's not going to, a deferment won't result in a different recommendation coming before you.
Can we beg to ask how we can, you can feel the mood, Steve, how can we best go forward in your view on this one? We've just got to, I mean, obviously a wrong has occurred, and we can't get back away from that because it just opens up all sorts of for others to jump in on that as well. So how can we deal with this, Steve? Give us some advice.
Well, you're ultimately you're going to have to take a view whether it's as part of this application or any subsequent amendment that may come, or a subsequent deferment and that comes back to you, whether any harm has been caused to this building, listed building, any harm. Because it goes back to para 215 of the NPPF. If there is harm, so any harm, then less than substantial, and you need to weigh the public benefits. I hear what members have said about potential public benefits. I would strongly take a different view in respect of that. That there are no public benefits that derive from the additional works that have taken place over and above the permission that was granted. That would outweigh the harm that has been caused. As I say, public benefits are not private benefits, and the only outwardly facing public benefit is the frontage with work which was secured and done, or would have been done, under the original approval. And that in itself, even that, wouldn't outweigh the harm by itself. So ultimately, I think wherever way you go, you're going to be faced with the dilemma of are there public benefits that outweigh the harm if you believe there is harm.
Okay, I can see that. Now, the other question I would ask, I'm sort of trying to prolong this, is if we went down the enforcement action, you're going to require certain works to be made under the enforcement. Now, whether we enforce it or it's the inspector, but whatever happens, you're never ever going to get around the fact that harm has been caused.
No.
Correct.
Correct. Well, I think we might have to just go for a vote for it then, I think. And, you know, we could defer if we wish to, but we've just heard from Councillor Sain, you've not said anything yet. So you can now.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I mean, it's a very nice debate. I think it's a quite open debate. But the thing is this, what I think that there was an application in 22, and with negotiations, there was recommendations. But the applicant didn't do work according to that. So there was a break of the planning commission's, planning policy, requirements. So it's really, there was said that there are some harms to be done, but the applicant did not come back or negotiate further that he wanted, but he has done the work anyway, which became its retrospective application. So, I mean, it is actually the policy or the regulation has been broken. So hence we are here, So I think there is a quite strong issue about the planning policies, policy. So, I mean, listed buildings, as you know, you experience everybody, listed buildings are there to preserve the building as it is. But so many changes has been done without the permission, or it is, there are harms been done, I think it is not just about rectifying or anything. So what the harms has been done, it could not be sort of changed or altered or bring it back to the original position, is it? So my concern is that, the applicant did not come or to the planning officers or say that they wanted to change certain things, and how can it be done, how can it be done, and also at the same time keep the building, preserved as it is. So I think there is a thing that it should be applied for everybody, for every listed buildings, really. So I think there is quite a big issue which has been done.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to Councillor Bashir, unless you don't want to say anything, because you're the one who hasn't said anything yet.
Say something, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, go on.
I'm going to change my mind, when.
You don't want to say anything, no. In that case, I will leave the last word with my Vice Chairman.
Okay. I think we're in a situation here where the heart's got to be overtaken by the head. There's a very clear case put forward by the officers. It says very clearly that they are in default, and therefore my view is that we have to vote for this proposal. But,
and that's what Mr. Councillor Kennedy said, but
I would like the officers really to have a good hard list of what will be required on the enforcement notice.
That's kind of what I'm saying too.
Is that an acceptable comment for me to make?
Sorry, I missed that.
Yeah. I said, is it acceptable for me to actually make that comment in this situation?
What, in terms of making sure that in terms of any requirements we put on the enforcement notice are
seriously thought about.
Are seriously thought through.
In terms of the elements that we would put on the notice will be the elements which are the most harmful. It might not include everything that we've noted in the comments, but we will make sure that they relate to the most important elements of the proposal.
Yeah. Thank you.
Fine, okay.
Okay.
Well, the officer's recommendation is to refuse. As always, if you agree with the officer's recommendation, it's green, red if you don't, and yellow if you're going to abstain. Fine, we've got 7 agree with the officer's recommendation, 3 that don't agree with the officer's recommendation, and somebody trod the abstaining route. So, unfortunately, so that has been approved, the officer's recommendation. We'll now go to the second vote, which is the listed building. Can you clear the thing? We'll vote again. Yellow, green if you agree with the officers in the listed, red if you don't agree with it, and yellow if you're going to abstain. Okay, the person who's abstained has decided to agree with the officer's recommendation. That has been approved as well. Okay. But I do wish, as my vice chairman has said, and has said, that when we do walk down the enforcement action, we are sympathetic to what the committee have said. Right. I think we should do. Right, so we'll go to item 9, which is questions pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 10.2, due notice which has been given. I close the meeting, probably one of our longer ones at 5:45. Thank you very much. See you, and by the way, have a happy Christmas, everybody. And I'll see you.